Hey everyone, hope your day is going well. According to this video, there are some baby boomer life skills that are no longer useful today. I'm very curious to see if that is the case and what will it be. And I guess, that happens with each generation. We're going to face it now with AI. A lot of uh, things that we thought were important or skills maybe won't be useful anymore. So adaptability will be key. And baby boomer, the years are like 1946 to 64, right? Somewhere around there. So my mom was born in 65. So she's another, I don't even know what generation that is. I never knew about all this generation stuff. People have been using some of this as a derogatory term and stuff. I don't like that, man. I do not like that at all. And you know, the young are dissing the old dissing the new. What are we doing? No. All right, let's jump into this.
Who among us doesn't remember the days when we had to memorize phone numbers? It certainly tested our memory,
Well,
keeping track of our home phone number, friends' numbers, and select family members.
well, maybe that skill is still useful, right? Because sometimes you don't have your phone or your batteries out and you want to call somebody, you maybe ask a phone of a passerby. How are you going to call somebody if you don't know the number? So, yeah. And I don't really know any. I know my phone numbers from when I was a kid. That doesn't exist anymore, but I still know it. So that's so weird that it stays with you, right?
Knowing these by heart was a necessity, especially when it came to
It's
making
still
any phone
useful,
call,
though.
and most importantly, if you were stranded by a payphone. It's hard to believe that we once kept all of these numbers stored right in our head, while all the other important phone numbers were written down on a list somewhere by the telephone.
Yeah. How many phone numbers did you know? How many phone numbers could you do? I knew like maybe five or something that I knew uh, before. I think something around that five phone numbers and some other ones of emergency services. So maybe not the short ones. I mean, there's longer ones too here in Belgium. So maybe six or seven at most.
Back then, we just didn't have the luxury of knowing who was calling, so there was no
Oh,
screening our phone calls. When the phone
yeah,
rang, we
that's
answered it, no matter who was on the other end. And
or let
taking
it
down
ring.
messages for the other people in the household was all part of the process. It was polite and helpful to the person calling to ensure they would get a return phone call. No call would go to waste, because who knew what important message might be on the other end. GPS and digital maps may have made our lives easier, but let's not forget the
Facts.
satisfaction of unfolding a paper map and plotting a course to somewhere new. Reading a paper map took skill and patience to study every inch of the map, plus be able to navigate in real time. When traffic, construction, or roadblocks popped up, you had to plot a new course on the fly.
Yeah, that's
It
the
wasn't easy,
tough
but at
one.
least you could never get lost. Road
Yeah,
trip
that is definitely an improvement with GPS. We gotta admit that even though there's charm in reading a map, it's still a useful skill. I wouldn't say this is useless at all. It's very very useful, but GPS definitely is one of the technologies that it saves you some time and is very helpful, especially with roadblocks and stuff. Yeah, you know, I've only done one trip, with my wife, then girlfriend. I think we were 19 or 20, driving to Paris without GPS. I think we were 15 minutes in, we already took a wrong turn. But after that, we did pretty good. 15 minutes in, we screwed up, and then after that, we did pretty good. But luckily, after that, GPS was there available. But you have to buy them separately, right? Back then, there wasn't no built-in GPS yet, or in the very expensive cars that we couldn't afford, right?
trips back then added an element of adventure, especially when you had someone riding
Definitely.
along to help navigate.
You see some stuff that you wouldn't otherwise see, right? Take the scenic route.
Sewing used to be a practical skill that was taught both at home and at school. Prior to mass-produced clothing available at every turn, many women would make their own clothes by using patterns and a trusty sewing machine. The sewing machine used to be a very important household device, and it got plenty of use over the years, and then it was probably passed down to you. Mending clothes, altering them, or even sewing your own shirts and trousers was a reflection of how we used to be much more self-sufficient. Not to mention, it saved a lot of money.
Yeah, but it's still useful. You can't say that it's useless, but the problem is it's not really being passed down anymore. Which, like for me, an example, I'm not very tall. You buy a pant, sometimes it's too long. My mother-in-law is very good at shortening it and then sewing it back together. But, it would be a useful skill to learn on my own, for doing it myself or, so it's definitely not useless.
Cursive writing, with its elegant swirls and loops, was a
Cursive
hallmark
writing?
of our generation.
useless?
It's
That's
a
not
style
useless.
that added a personal touch to both letters and documents, and was seen as a much quicker method for writing things down. The art of writing in cursive was something we grew up doing, first by seeing our parents write, and then officially learning how to do it in the early years of elementary school. Not only did it improve our fine motor skills, but it just looked more graceful, and seemed to carry with it a bit more of your own personality, which is something
Everybody
that text
has to learn
messaging
this.
just doesn't convey.
No, but every kid learns it at school, right? At least we do here in Belgium. I imagine everywhere, if you have education available, that's one of the basic principles you learn. What happens if the power goes out? And if you don't know that anymore, you see what happens to the world, when there's a power shortage or whatever, it's one day at work, you're at the office, the power falls out, the internet falls out, you're useless. So, yeah, one blackout, one big blackout, one solar flare. Oh, this is going to be very important to learn.
Remember your first car? Learning to drive
I
was a
do.
rite of passage as a teenager, and many of us learned to drive using a manual transmission. Some cars had a 3-on-the-tree column shift, while others had a stick shift with 4 on the floor. Driving back then required both feet and both hands, plus the wherewithal to know when to change gears. While automatic cars have become the norm, knowing how to drive a stick shift was a valuable skill and a true connection to the driving experience.
Yeah, here, it's only become like not even the norm, but with new cars, it's only like 10 years or something here. Manual transmission was always, there was no automatic really, or there was no option to do your driver's license with an automatic car when I was doing it in 2004 or 2005. So there was not, no. So we have a little bit of catching up to do in that. But I do know, like my daughter, when she becomes 18, it's going to be all self-driving. So that's something, yeah, that will be lost probably.
Balancing your checkbook was taught to us because it was the foundation for financial responsibility. Our income and all of our expenses were reviewed at least once a month to keep things accurate. This
don't do
skill
checks
taught us
here.
the value of money and helped us to live within our means, which is something missing in today's world. With credit and debit
important.
cards making spending easier and easier, many young people nowadays lack the fundamental financial literacy of balancing a simple checking account.
Yeah, that is true. And that has been true, I believe, at least here in Belgium, for a lot of people. You don't really learn that at school. One of the most fundamental things, there's some things in school that say, what are you doing? Why are you, this is not so important. Why don't you teach them, some valuable skills in life like managing a budget? Maybe it's all part of the conspiracy theory. Maybe they want us in debt. That's how they hook us. Because this is so important. This is
Before the internet, we
more
all
useful
relied
than
on
ever.
our alphabet skills to find things, from looking up a definition in a dictionary to running our
yeah.
fingers down a card catalog at the library. It seemed
Definitely easier
everything was
now.
organized alphabetically. Do you remember doing research using encyclopedias? First, you would locate the correct volume. Then you would flip through the pages to find what you were looking for by the first letter. This very basic skill was much more valuable back then, and it's yet another example of how figuring things out yourself meant using brain power to first figure out where to look.
True. And the salesman
The art of writing
encyclopedia
letters was a
salesman. They're
communication
gone.
skill that dominated for centuries. Handwritten letters were the only way to communicate long distances before
I
the
love a
advent of the
handwritten letter.
telephone. Not to mention, it taught us patience. Letter writing was common throughout the 20th century, and it carried with it our own personal touch, showing that we cared enough to sit down and craft a message specifically for the recipient. These letters often created lasting memories that became keepsakes for some and simply strengthened connections between people.
I still do that from time to time, so.
Typing
Definitely
on a
not
typewriter
useless.
was once part of everyone's schooling. The class taught you how to line up your fingers and then memorize the layout of all the
Yeah.
keys, which helped to build up your typing speed. You also learned how to maintain a typewriter, which included loading in sheets of paper, replacing the ink ribbon when needed, and dusting off the type before use. This important skill was essential for most of us because typewriters were used everywhere. Typewriters also taught us to be detail-oriented, as making a mistake usually meant starting all over.
Yeah. I did learn it, but it was after school that I signed up to learn it. So now I could type very fast. But there seems to be like a generation that learned it. Then, like I said, my parents' generation, they do not know how to work a computer or a keyboard. It's like they don't know where the keys are. And then there's my generation that came along, late 80s and then 90s and stuff, that do know how to type. So there's a whole gap there where maybe it was important. I don't know. Maybe it's a Belgian thing. I don't know. But no, a lot of people don't know how to work a keyboard here.
In most homes of the past, there could be found a set of dishes that were only used on special occasions.
Oh, yeah, we
The
still
fine
have that.
china would be displayed in a china cabinet year-round, right up until that very special holiday dinner or party, where the dishware transformed the ordinary meal into a memorable event. These dishes were usually passed down through the generations,
Yep,
but
yep.
storing them and the tradition of using them on a regular basis is something that you very seldom see today.
Oh, he getting a good china?
Dating the old-fashioned way was all about face-to-face interactions, genuine conversations, and getting to know someone deeply. It's a slower, more intentional approach to finding a significant other. Rather than swiping left or right on a screen, dating used to be about
Yeah.
making a real connection with someone and understanding their values before committing. This
That is
also
a shame,
required us
though.
to have good social skills, manners, and good hygiene if we expected to find that special someone. Dating today is quite different because you never know what you're going to get after seeing
Tough.
their profile picture.
It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. This is not a great. That is a bad evolution of technology, man. People are more indoors. They're not really connecting, and there's always another swipe, right? So it's like if you scroll in Netflix, I say, "Oh, this is a great movie," but let me check what else is on. And this is happening to the dating world. Like you can always swipe more. So it's no, that's a bad evolution. That sucks.
There was once a time when we valued doing most things ourselves. From the simplest things, like manually
Rolling down a
rolling down a
window.
car window. It was all about the effort. We would physically go out to eat rather than have it delivered. And we used to have to
Yeah.
go to the bank on a regular basis and actually go inside to deposit and withdraw money.
Yeah, but
which
not
also
going to
meant
the
we
bank
had to
is correct,
interact
dude.
with the bank teller. All of these things remind
For me,
us
at
of the
least.
simple pleasures of going about our life. These manual actions were not only part of our daily routines, but they taught us to appreciate the little things that filled our lives. Remember,
Well, waiting in line is not really something I like to do, but for me, like that stuff is an improvement in terms of time. In terms of I don't like really going out anyway. I do like to go out and eat into restaurants, so that definitely needs to stay alive. All the menial stuff, I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. Not a
remember
fan
when
of it.
cooking meant pulling out those old recipe cards that were passed down through the family? Each
Yeah, I
one
love
held
that.
a little piece of history, handwritten with notes and tweaks added over the years. Unlike today,
And
we used to
stains
flip
on
through
it,
a
too.
box or a
Some
binder of
sauce.
recipes that were a
Yeah.
collection of our favorite dishes. These recipes were simple, made with ingredients you always had on hand, and most importantly, they reminded you of family. Not only was it about feeding your family, but it kept some of your family traditions alive.
That's beautiful, man. I love it. Love it.
Back before microwaves became a kitchen staple, cooking was an art form that took preparation and time. There were no ready-to-eat meals from the grocery store that could be zapped and ready in seconds. Instead, you'd plan meals for the week and cook a meal each night. The stovetop
I
and
do that
oven got
every
plenty
day.
of use, from things like simmering, baking, and boiling a variety of foods. You really had to know your way around the kitchen, and most were taught how to cook by their mother, and also from home economics classes taught at school. While it did take longer, the meals were often healthier, made from scratch without any processed shortcuts. There was something special about that slower pace, where you could really savor the process and the results. Sending a fax was
Dude, I cook every day, man. I get the groceries, I cook. I mean, I don't go grocery shopping every day. I just told you. I don't like it. I do it. But, I like to get my own ingredients and stuff. So everything is how I want it. A little bit of a control there. But I love to cook. Thought it to myself, but man, I love it.
once the fastest way to send important documents from one business to another.
Fax.
Before email took over, fax machines were the
Yeah.
primary tool in any office. First,
Some
you'd place
people
your
still have
document in
them.
the machine, then dial the number, and listen for that familiar screeching sound as
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fax went through. Sometimes you'd have to deal with a
Horrible.
busy signal and try again, but it would eventually go through. Sure, the copies weren't always the clearest, but they got the job done, and there was a certain satisfaction in knowing you could send a document halfway across the world in
That is
just
cool.
minutes.
That is cool. It's a cool technology.
Doing laundry by hand not only got your clothes clean, but it was a real workout. Scrubbing, rinsing, and wringing out each item took effort, meaning many people didn't have automatic washing machines until years later. Then there was hanging the clothes out to dry on a clothesline in the yard. There was nothing quite like the fresh scent of clothes
Yeah,
dried in
it
the
still
open
is.
air, crisp and sun-kissed, as long as it didn't rain. It was a much simpler time, when taking care of chores meant more than just tossing them in a machine and walking away. Sometimes you had to do things the hard way.
It's true, so it is great for saving time, or if you're not in a climate friendly environment, where it rains 90% of the time, you can hang it inside, then it doesn't really dry greatly. So that is an improvement, and it saves time for a lot of people. But
Before
It's
Google and
therapeutic to
automatic
hang 'em
spell
outside.
check, if you wanted to know how to spell a word or what it meant, you'd have to turn to a dictionary. That big, heavy book that just about everyone owned was essential.
Yeah.
Finding a word wasn't always quick. It meant you needed to understand how to find things alphabetically. But flipping through those pages also sometimes led you to new and interesting words
True.
along the way. Every home
True.
and classroom had one, and it was a go-to for students, writers, and anyone who needed
Yeah,
to
man.
double-check their work.
I love flipping through a dictionary.
Shorthand was a skill that set you apart, especially in an office environment a few decades ago. Taking notes at lightning speed was a huge advantage, whether you were in a
That is
meeting,
chicken
on a
scratch,
phone
man.
call,
What is that?
or dictating a conversation. Learning those unique symbols and abbreviations was like mastering a secret code, and it felt
Wow, I never learned that. I never learned that. What?
pretty cool to be able to write faster
it's
than most
different here
people
in
could
Belgium,
talk.
I don't know.
Long before texting came along, shorthand was the original way to communicate quickly and efficiently, and it was a skill
Wow,
that made
that's
you a
cool.
professional.
That's
Picture taking used to be way more than just tapping a button on your phone. There was a kind of special magic in knowing how to operate a 35mm camera manually, which
There's also a special magic in knowing that somebody is always watching your pictures when developing them. I had a friend, and there was a place here that did that, back in the day, and he worked there. Oh boy, there was some stories there. That's all I'm gonna say. There's a lot I could say right now that I'm not gonna say.
included loading and unloading film. You had to be precise, making sure not to expose the roll to light. And once the film was loaded, every single shot mattered, because
Yeah,
you
that's
only had a
true.
limited number of exposures. After taking your pictures, there was an excitement while waiting for them to be developed, not knowing exactly what you'd captured until the prints were in your hands.
Yeah, Yeah, and then you see a finger.
Long
a
before
butt.
Google changed the way we search
The
for
yellow
phone numbers
pages.
and reviews of businesses, the phone book was the go-to source for finding help.
Yeah, the phone
That
book,
big,
yeah.
thick book sat by the phone, ready
That's a
to help you
murder
track
weapon
down
right
any
there.
contact or business you needed. Finding someone's number in the white pages was often tricky, especially if they had a common last name. So it was
You know what a truly useless skill is today? And this is no argument needed. The people that could rip the phone book apart. Like, you can't even find a phone book anymore, so how you gonna rip it apart? Ripping the phone book apart, man, those guys are scary.
in the white pages was often tricky, especially if they had a common last name. So it was helpful if you had their
Yeah.
address too. The yellow pages were the place to find a reputable
the
business,
addresses are
from
in there.
plumbers
That's
to
wild.
pizza shops. Every business wanted a huge ad in the yellow pages, and many even named their business so that they would show up first.
How many
Think about all
linoleum
those
shops do
businesses
we
that were
need?
called ABC or AAA. Navigating the phone book was an essential skill that everyone used to master back in the day.
Yep.
At Recollection Road, I believe preserving the past is incredibly important, and our friends at Legacy Box do too. So much so, they've offered my viewers memories. Due to the box, you can convert your analog box,
Oh,
and
yeah,
like magic,
I've done
receive
that
back your
myself.
originals and digital time. Enjoy an exclusive 55% Preserve your past today with Legacy Box. Buy today to take advantage of this exclusive offer.
Here, go
and send
visit
them
it,
in whenever
boys.
you're
Go
ready.
visit it.
Go to
Not affiliate, not a sponsor.
legacybox.com/recollection to save 55% while supplies last.
They definitely
Before
preserve
calculators
it,
became
for
common
sure.
in the 1970s, the slide rule was the tool of choice for anyone needing to do complex math. Engineers,
I never used that.
scientists, and students all relied on this handy device to calculate everything from basic arithmetic to advanced equations. Using a
Really?
slide rule took skill, requiring you to understand the math behind it and carefully move the sliders to get the right answer. Learning to use a slide rule was a rite of passage in high school, and while it has been replaced by modern technology, there was joy in understanding such a precise manual tool.
This is the first time I ever see that.
Canning was a tradition that brought many families together, preserving whatever harvest they
That
could
is
from
not
their garden.
useless.
It was time-consuming work that included sterilizing jars, prepping food, and making sure each jar was sealed just right. But after seeing all of those jars lined up, filled with fruit, vegetables, and jams, there was a deep sense of accomplishment. It was a way to ensure you had food stored away for the winter, providing a sense of security through those cold winter months. Plus,
Yeah, this is not useless. Doomsday Preppers entered the chat.
nothing beat the flavor of homemade fruit preserves. Wallpaper was something that used to be
Oh,
very
man.
prevalent in homes across the country. And so
Yeah.
that meant many people knew how to properly hang and remove wallpaper. Not only
Hang
did
it
it
is
cover
just
your
hard.
walls, but there was a lot of technique that made every pattern match perfectly, without any wrinkles. It was a
You would always have to call the same uncle who knew to hang wallpaper to do it. Now he went to house. Like, man, this guy has to hang wallpaper every day for different family members. Taking it off is a hassle too. You know, we were just talking about this the other day with somebody in the comments about wallpaper. The first house, I remember a house where I went to live when I was a kid. It had like 7 layers of wallpaper. You know, they just put one over the other, one over the other. The room was like 5 inches bigger all of a sudden after we removed it.
time-consuming process, from
Yeah.
choosing a pattern to removing the old wallpaper before starting. But the result added style and expression to any room. This was one of the original DIY projects for homeowners, long before HGTV.
Yeah.
Changing your own oil was a rite of passage for many young men. It was one of those things that you would learn from your dad, or maybe
Again,
even
not
an
useless.
auto shop class at school. Not being afraid to climb under the car and get a little dirty was a satisfying feeling, especially knowing you were saving money and maintaining your engine. Changing your oil yourself was also a point of pride for anyone who enjoyed being in the garage and working with their hands. Patience was just a necessary part of life back then. Whether it was
That's
waiting
true.
for a letter in the mail, watching bread rise, or even dialing a number on a rotary phone, things just took time. And in a way, that was a good thing. It taught you to slow
Understand.
down, appreciate the
Yeah.
process, and not rush through life.
Good
Patience
point.
was more than just a virtue. It was a way of life that made everything a little more rewarding in the end.
That is cool. That's nice.
Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and make sure to check.
Yeah, let me know too. And these are not totally useless. Many of them are very useful and may even become more useful in the future, depending on what will happen. Because if we rely so much on technology and suddenly it drops out, there you standing, D word in your hand. What are you gonna do? Uh, yeah, so definitely some important skill, and some maybe not so important, but or less frequent, and not really being passed down anymore. But it's cool that a lot of these things get preserved by some people, and yeah, I'm definitely interested in seeing 10, 20 years down the line how some skills will disappear and others might come back and new ones might need to be created. So it's very interesting to see that throughout time. I really enjoyed this video. Really enjoyed this. And the thing about having patience, that was really nice ending there. Like, we're talking about saving time. It's very useful sometimes with technology. We save time, but it definitely has impacted our patience, because if we're used to everything going fast, we expect everything to go fast. And if it doesn't, that's when the frustration starts to set in, right? Yep. Yep. Yeah. Good video. Hey, thank you everybody for being here. Hope to see you in another one. Peace.